Here comes the sun. All right. It is time to go over the path of the sun, the path of Raish, one of my favorite paths on the tree. Before we get into that, I would like to explain a little bit about color energy, because I know that I've been talking about color energy on these and it doesn't really compute without understanding. So, first, every one of these paths has a color, but it also has a color in all four worlds of the Kabbalah or the Tetragrammaton. So right here in this tree, we see the color path between the spheres of Yesod and Hod right there. It's not really a good arrow, is it? But so when we look at the Tetragrammaton, we have the world of Atziluth. Again, just a quick reminder, the Yod world of Atziluth, the archetypal world, which represents the fire wands. So all of the number cards correspond with the Sephirah in the tree, and the court cards correspond with certain places on the tree too of that specific element. Fire wands, water cups, air swords, earth pentacles. So the King of Wands would reside in the Atziluth tree, or the archetypal tree, or the Yod tree. Okay? The Two of Wands would correspond to that actual Sephirah right there. But the colors that this shows is like the basic color of the elements, fire, water, air, and earth. Yod, He, Vav, He. We'll get into that later, but you should watch the introductory videos. But the actual colors are this. So when you're reading Dion Fortune's books, or you're studying the Kabbalah, or you're looking at tarot cards and it has all these colors in there and you don't really know why, always remember that there could be colors that correspond with the Tattva cards, the element of the Tattvas, the Sephirah or the past that correspond with them too. So just keep that in mind. This is a little bit more advanced stuff, but the actual colors that represent the path of the sun are orange. I mean, I'm supposed to be seeing arrows here, but I don't see them. So orange, there we go. There's a little arrow. I would say amber, gold, and then amber with a red ray. The reason why the arcana has so much power in the tarot and represents higher powers is because besides the number cards and the court cards, the arcana cards exist in all four worlds. So when you do the path workings, you have to keep in mind the colors of that path and the frequencies that those colors represent. Because color, in fact, does represent energy. All right. So let's get into this. The sun. Here comes the sun. That song gets stuck in my head. When I look at this card, I get such great vibes from it. Like the authentic baby, the innocence of the sun. But it goes deeper than that. We'll get into the story, the meanings, and the symbols in the card. So the path of Raish, this is the 30th path on the paths of wisdom. It is the sun card in the tarot, or the 19th key. The main color that it corresponds with is orange. The related sound is D natural. The planet that it corresponds with is the sun. The deeper hidden meaning is the head. And the double letter in the Hebrew system is fertility and barrenness. The esoteric title is the Lord of the Fire of the World. Now, on the 32 paths of wisdom, the 30th path is the collecting intelligence, and is so called because astrologers deduce from it the judgment of the stars and of the celestial signs and the perfections of their science, according to the rules of their resolutions. Remember, all of this is about occult science. The path of Raish connects Hod, splendor, with Yesod, the foundation, and is the first path of the personality triad to be encountered and rising on the tree. It is an active path on the intellectual formative side. It is the activating force of the personality, which, like the higher self and the spiritual self, is composed of a masculine intuitive dynamic yod, and a feminine intellectual formative he, and a set of energies which are the result of the opposing interaction of the two, which equilibrating or balancing creates vav. So what does that mean? Well, we've already learned. First, we need to understand that the path that we're dealing with is here. Rising on the tree would be this way if we are doing the spiritual work. Manifesting from spirit to matter would be this way as it comes into existence. The spheres that it corresponds with, that the path corresponds with, is this one, Yesod. Okay, that's off center. Yesod, this one. And Hod, this one. The moon and Mercury. We also know that all of these paths below the line or the veil of Paraketh, and if I could just scribble that on there, that would be better. Well, let's just say everything below that line is the veil of Paraketh. The initiating paths are the universe, judgment, the moon, and now we haven't done the moon yet, but we're on the sun. So these paths here are the initiating paths, these first paths. And remember, I don't want to get too complicated, but remember that this represents the intellectual side, and this represents the emotional side here. Okay, so it's an intellectual path that we're on when it comes to the sun. And we'll get deeper into that. I know it doesn't seem that way, but you'll see that it all makes sense soon. Now, what he's referring to in as far as the Yod He Vav He and all of the initiating paths and Tifereth and all of that stuff, what he just said there was, we know that, remember that there are 3 stages to the mysteries, right? The first stage is just where we are now. That's the Nefesh. The second stage below that line is the Nefesh. Well, you know what? Let me use circles. That'd be better. Don't you think? Yeah, that would be better. So you have the Nefesh, the animal self here. And then you have the Ruach, which is, let me see if I can make a better circle, which is here. Tifereth is that center sphere, the higher self, the Christ force, the yellow one there. And then above that, you have what's called the macro prosopos, or the source. And that is also referred to as the neshama. So this is what is initiating you from here up. So your spirit is growing into trying to be your higher self into there. Okay? That initiating force there. Now, as far as the Yod He Vav He, the masculine and feminine, you can see that in the card represented by the boy and the girl. But to understand it better, from Hebrew is from right to left, okay? So all of this He Vav He is implicit inside of the Yod. So the Yod is the central point of manifestation in the archetypal world, which is known as primal fire. And the Yod, let's just say, creates the He. Yod creates He. And then the Yod He creates the Vav. That's what he's talking about. So this would be considered masculine, feminine, and the baby. The father, the mother, and the baby. And then through the father and the mother and the baby, we begin to create which creates the individual personality as it manifests down into existence, where God is coming into human form. Eventually, the baby is born on the physical earth. I hope that makes sense. At the highest, though, at the highest of the tree, we know that there is a divine masculine and feminine, or a feminine or a masculine and feminine force, or an alpha and omega force that has to work together to create anything. All right. So I hope we understand that part of it, because a lot of the times he'll say things and it doesn't really explain everything. So there is on this path the intellectual formative side. It is the activating force of the personality, which, like the higher self or Tiferet, and the spiritual self, is composed of a masculine, intuitive, dynamic Yod and a feminine, intellectual, formative He. And these set of energies are the result of the opposing interaction of the two equilibrating Vav, or the balancing comes in together, and Yetzirah, Yod He Vav. So the sun, Reish, is described as the collecting intelligence, meaning that it exercises control over a number of given components. So let's go back to the sun card here so we can see it. In this case, the signs of the zodiac are implied in these cards, which are symbolized by the 12 rays emanating from the sun. These signs are the 12 guideposts of the personality and receptacles of the planetary influences, one of which governs the birth and life course of each incarnation. Thus, the sun is central not only to the incarnation that we're experiencing now at hand, but acts as a link between the personalities which have been experienced in other incarnations and lifetimes. It's also collecting and that all the component parts of the personality are discovered on these lower paths. So when we're going through this initiation, let's just say Source, or the higher self, is collecting all these component parts of us, of this new individual that we are. And they're infused at this point with the dual action of the sun, light and warmth. Now, it may appear curious, but these are considered intellectual qualities. We're on the intellectual side of all this, by the way. And if you could describe one word for divine masculine and one word for divine feminine, what would it be? You can't use two words, just one. Now, I mean, I would say light and warmth are pretty good. Masculine is that outrushing spermos of force of creation and light and fire and life, and it just chaotically shoots out, right? And the feminine is the force of the collecting, stabilizing, encircling, garden creation so that the seed of the light can grow. So this makes more sense now when we look at the boy and the girl on the card. So the activity of this path is intellectual. In fact, the path of the sun is the highest level of the human intellect, as the star is the highest level of the emotions. They are balanced by the tower. Although looking at the card may hardly inspire confidence that a balance has taken place, yet this represents the effect of the combined energies of the sun and the star. And what he's talking about there is the tower card represents the combined energies of the sun and the star and what results of those energies. And yeah, we can discuss that later. Remember, the whole arcana is telling a story of this occult path of initiation from, I guess you could say, unawareness to awareness, or from lead into gold, energetically, consciously, and physically. Alchemy works on all those levels. So Reish means head, which is consistent with the idea that this is the highest path of human intellect and that this is the collecting intelligence. In this regard, there's an interesting illustration from an alchemical manuscript of 1606 showing a figure with an orb-shaped body, which is headless but holds the sun above. And beside this figure is written the world. Now, I couldn't find that picture, but I did find this one, because at first I thought this was the alchemy picture he was referring to, but this one's showing the same thing. There's some subtle hints in here to all kinds of symbols in this picture. Now, the sun is rested in alchemy right at where the head is. And remember, in Hermetics, all is mind. So if you want to look at it from a more, I guess you could say, out-of-body, scientific kind of level, consciousness is collecting data from the experiences of physical life. So as our bodies take in all the sensations of physical life, the head of the sun is taking in all of the information and data of the experience. Pretty neat, huh? So the head is the sun itself, held above the material body. Without the sun head, there could be no world. Now, from the original Golden Dawn, MacGregor Mathers corroborated this idea by calling the sun the splendor of the material world. And what does Hod represent on the tree of life? Right? Splendor. So the card basically represents the intellect acting upon the dualities of the human condition, consciousness and its earthly vehicle. You're dual. You're not just an animal, which I know a lot of people like to think you are, and you're easily programmed, and you can be if you're not aware or conscious, or you're not trying to become authentic into your higher self. You can definitely be programmed. But if you're a spiritual person and you're trying to grow, well, then it's all about that consciousness, which is inside the experience of the earthly vehicle, isn't it? So this is the point of connection of the human intellect with the higher intellect, the greater life. The sun is also the S-U-N son, is also the S-O-N son who carries on the work of the Father. The 30th path is a composite one. And remember, let me go back to the Tetragrammaton here, okay? So the 30th path is a composite one. The 4 elements, the signs of the zodiac, and the planets are all involved under the rulership of the sun, as is symbolized by the hexagram. That figure means the perfect integration of personality and higher self. On the tree of life, this is shown as the interaction of the astral and ethical triangles, God, the son of Tifereth, being primary to both. However, the energies may be symbolized. The path of the sun is a very important initiatory one. So, the 4 elements of the Tetragrammaton all exist in this main tree, right? Don't forget that either. So you have Atzluth above that line, the archetypal world, and then you have, it just depends on which picture you're looking at, but the next world down would be Bria, the creative world. The next world down would be Yetzirah, the formative world. And then below that would be Asaya, right? So you have Atziluth, depending on the picture you're looking at. Sometimes they put the line below Bina and Chokma. Sometimes they'll put the line here for Atziluth. But you have Atziluth, you have Bria, you have Yetzirah, and you have Asaya. Okay? Now, what he's talking about with the sun being the holy hexagram, or those triangles, remember the first that you have the supernal. I think I'm starting to figure out this triangle, but first you have the supernal triangle here, which represent these 3 spheres, and this is going to look terrible because I don't know exactly where to pull this from. And then that reflects into the next triangle. Let's see if I can do this right here. There we go. I think I know how to do this now. Nope. Yep, right there. That's the supernal triangle. And then there is the ethical triangle that goes into Tifereth, that yellow sphere. And then here is the astral triangle. So, again, even the triangles, or you could say, if you're looking at this in numerology, the 3, 6, 9, right? Because, we went over that earlier. So even in the triangles, you can see that Tifereth is initiating down into the earth. It's trying to pull data from the earth back into Tifereth. It's trying to come in contact. I hope I'm not confusing anybody. So this actually would be a great place for this path, because you have the forces of Yesod, which is the formative but also sexual forces, where we actually, we're not even decided if we're going to be a man or a woman until we leave the sphere of Yesod and before we come into the earth. And then you have the intellectual path of Hod over here in the orange sphere. All right. I feel like I'm if I keep going, it's going to get confusing. So you have the 4 elements, the signs of the zodiac, and the planets are all involved. And you could see this in the card, right? You can see the zodiac signs represented by the rays of the sun, the 12 rays of the sun, in Crowley's card and in Robert Wang's card. You can see the planets represented by those 7 yods above the boy and the girl in Robert Wang's card. The experience of the sun is very profound, for it is an introduction to the inner sun, which is the light of the personality, as the physical sun is the light of the material world. On this path, one experiences the warmth and light, the divine masculine and feminine. But as on the plane of sensation, we experience all of that here on the earth, where we sense things through our senses. It is a sun at which one cannot look directly without suffering damage. So the opposites attributed to Raish by the Sefer Yetzirah, fertility and barrenness, remind us that the same sun, which illuminates us and causes warm growth, can also destroy us utterly. The blessings of the farmer is also the curse of the solitary traveler in the desert. So the farmer uses the sun to grow his crops, but the desert traveler is being tortured by the sun and killed. Okay. This is the initiation of the personality to the great source of inner light, an initiation which takes place within the physical vehicle or walled garden and affects the dual components of the lower self. You can see the walled or the wall in all of the cards here. There's a wall. There's a wall. There's a wall. And I guess this is like the little wall here in Crowley's card. The walled garden, right? An important point must be repeated here, one all too often neglected by those who discuss the path. Work on the paths brings about definite physiochemical changes in the human body. In this study course, The 32 Paths of Wisdom, Paul Foster Case emphasizes the extent to which this is the case. In describing the path of Raish, he says of the man who has achieved adepthood. So inner differences from the average person are due to psychological contrast to the mental states of ordinary human beings, but they are also the outer signs of organic changes inside the skin of the new creature. He is chemically and structurally unlike genus Homo. There are different constituents in his bloodstream. Through his nervous system pass currents of force not present in most human bodies, because in his organism, channels are open which are closed in the physical vehicles of most persons. Centers in the nervous system and in the brain and glands are related to them. They will function differently in the body of an adept from the way they do in the bodies of the greater number of his contemporaries. So what is Paul Foster Case saying here? He is saying that when we take this path of the sun, what we're doing is we are changing ourselves alchemically and energetically, not just intellectually and psychologically, but also our bodies and our vessel begins to change. The energy of the sun, which in the Golden Dawn is called Luke's energy, it causes changes in us. It starts prepping our body and our mind to become this higher authentic self that we're surrendering to by turning lead into gold. So we could say that magic down here, the work down here, or I guess you could say the work down here below the veil of Paroketh, which is magic, is prepping our bodies to turn lead into gold. Magic, alchemy, astrology, the moon, the sun, and the stars. Okay? I told you, spiritual, even so, this is why I say when people throw out all of the old teachings and say, well, they're old. Well, you have to remember, all of these people experienced initiation in the senses of their body and all through the meditations of their void walking travels. So first there was a mystery school. Then there was the Kabbalah. Whether it goes back to Egypt or Babylon, we could talk about that later. But this tree of life has helped us understand what's really going on for thousands and thousands of years. And now it's evolved into what's called the Hermetic Kabbalah. And in 1888, and even before then, this system has been evolving so that we get a higher understanding. And that's exactly what's supposed to happen. Not only do we evolve physically down here on the earth as humans, our civilness, our understanding, our intellect, things like that, but spirit evolves with us so that it learns how to communicate with us better. So this is why Manly P. Hall talks about even Christianity itself was an evolved religion of other religions. This is why I think it's death to get stuck on one belief system or even one spiritual system. Although I'm in love with this spiritual system and I use it consistently. All right, anyways, enough of that. Back into the sun. Now, one of the most serious mistakes which can be made is to conceptually divorce the physical body from the powers which created it and which function through it. This is the crucible of the alchemists. Remember, what is the crucible of the alchemists? Our bodies. That's the crucible of the alchemist. And the sun is an important symbol in the alchemical process of turning lead into gold. The paths of the personality lead directly into the physical vehicle. For example, the consciousness, which we know as our self, is directly connected to our bodies. The higher self functions through the personality if its influence is to be brought to the physical plane. As pure spirit, it must function through the higher self. Of course, there is no actual separation, even though we look at like mind, body, and spirit as a separate thing. There's really no separation of these three. It's just a perception. The tree of life describes a racial perception of a pattern of separation, but since perception varies widely from organism to organism, or each individual to each individual, we all have to literally create our own Kabbalah. So what does Wang mean by that? To create your own Kabbalah? Well, what he means, and I think using the four trees kind of helps. Magic is the process of conforming change with will, right? Or causing change to conform with our will. But the will comes from the higher self in this case. Liam Thomas Christopher and other magicians, but I like Liam's book, created a system where that's exactly what we're doing. By invoking each element through each grade, which he got from the Golden Dawn teachings, we are creating our own higher self to come into, to merge with our physical bodies. We're surrendering to it. We're creating our own individuality. We're creating our own Kabbalah. We're using these systems, these powers, these egregores, energies, whatever you want to call them, to help us become more authentic to this higher self that we have an issue surrendering to when the ego and the animal self come into this war with each other, right? So when Paul Foster Case says, oh, you're going to start having psychological changes where you don't really relate to the rest of the world, but the light and the energy of the sun is also going to cause physical changes and different types of energy to happen into your body, where most of the people around you that don't understand what's happening is going to happen to you. So that's going to cause you to feel maybe kind of isolated and different than everybody. But remember, the path of Christ, Tifereth, that whole teaching tells us plainly what's going to happen to us as we individuate and ascend spiritually. And remember Tifereth here, that's the Christ force, right? So the path of the sun right here, Raish, the 30th path, is the highest initiation of this process. The experience of the path of Raish is critical to the development of this individual Kabbalah that we're trying to create. It is moreover the path where one may receive the acceptance and imprint of those beings who direct the inner learning experience of the student. Well, that's a scary thing to say, beings that are directing the experience of the student. Read What the Ancient Wisdom Expects from Its Disciples by Manly P. Hall. In this day and age, if he would have changed that word from guides or angels instead of beings, it wouldn't be so scary, would it? It is the point at which the student may be admitted to candidacy for the greater initiation of Tifereth. A considerable number of discoveries are made on this path leading into Hod, a realm described by some as the point where the inner teachers exert their influence on the material world. This is a path where the nature of the relationship between mind and body may become clear. where one begins to understand the control and limitations of the intellect. It is also a path of awakening to use the tremendous sexual power of Yesod. It is the point at which sexuality is understood to be the great secret force manipulated by the initiate of the mysteries. Yesod is the moon, sexuality, the ebbing and flowing astral light beneath our material existence. Okay, so let me show you where that is on the tree. Yesod. Just in case you don't remember, right here, the moon. And when you see the man kind of put up against the tree, it corresponds directly with the sexual forces, right? And Hod, what does that represent? Hod is Mercury, the first differentiation of the specific personality. It is hermaphroditic, both male and female, as these qualities have yet to be separated out when considering the Sephirah on a downward course towards manifestation. So when considering this downward force towards manifestation, how do things manifest? Do you remember? I hope you remember from the previous videos. How do things manifest according to the tree? They manifest in the lightning flash. So we're not even man or woman yet until we leave the sphere of Yesod. And as we come down into the earth, I'm a boy or I'm a girl, right? See what I mean? That's what he's saying. But rising through the tree, as we grow spiritually, is a different story. Well, this is where we come to the wisdom and understanding of what's going on here when we rise in the tree, which is kind of represented by a coiled serpent that I'm not going to draw, but that's what he says, or that's what he means when he says that, right? Yesod is the moon, sexuality, the ebbing and flowing astral light beneath our material existence. Hod is Mercury, the first differentiation of the specific personality. So you're not even an individual intellectually until you so let me do the lightning flash. Let me explain that again. So let's say your spirit coming into matter and you're manifesting. And as you come down, you're not separate from anything or understand that you're an individual personality until you get, boom, right there. Okay, I'm an individual personality. Well, we have to go down another sphere of creation to another place where we're going to decide if you're going to be a man or a woman. Boom, this is where it decides. And then it manifests. But now I actually missed a part of the lightning flash. Let me try this again. Ding, boom, 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 boom. There we go. Now you're a personality. Now you're an individual personality. Now you're being decided if you're going to be a man or a woman. Now you're born. And so all of the things in magic that we manifest magically happens that same way, okay? According to the Hermetic Kabbalists, the Golden Dawn, the Rosicrucians, those people. When we're growing spiritually, we come up the tree. Now we're coming into the understanding and initiation of these energies. Does that make sense? So this is where the path is. This is what the sun card represents. So when you do the path working, you'll better understand it. It is hermaphroditic, both male and female, implicated by the boy and girl in the card, as these qualities have yet to be separated out when considering the Sephirah on a downward course of manifestation. The path of the sun, thus considered developmentally, is the point of childhood of the emerging personality as it builds towards a new incarnation. When we travel this path upwards, we return to this point of new innocence. It is quite literally a growing younger, a process of birthing backwards. Pretty cool, huh? It is quite literally a growing younger. So when people are like, grow up, be an adult, do all this stuff, do what the world wants you to do. And as you're animal self comes in your ego and comes in contact with the ego, and you're working all this stuff out. It's like, yeah, I know how I got to exist in the world, but I'm not really from this world. It is quite literally a growing younger, a process of birthing backwards until we reach a stage where there is some recollection of the source from which we came, a remembering. The youthfulness, the childhood of the sun, is represented in Arthur Edward Waite's card, here following an iconography developed by Eliphas Levi. A child is shown riding a white horse, which is the symbol of Apollo, the sun god. The implication is that on this path we become the child Apollo. Arthur Edward Waite didn't really tell us that, and he should have done that when we bought that first deck of cards. Apollo. Or if you read Revelation, Jesus descending upon a white horse, that kind of thing. That's what it is. Tiferet, into matter, or matter being initiated into the higher consciousness of Tiferet, the Christ force, the Buddha. All right, you get it. Pounding that in there. It's getting redundant, right? So the Golden Dawn card, Wang's Golden Dawn card over there on the right, basically following the Marseille version, shows two naked children. Let's see if I can focus in on this. Oh, of course I can, but it's fuzzy as hell. Anyways, it shows two naked children in a garden enclosed by a wall. One is standing on earth, and the other is standing on water. These are the purest expression of the positive male and negative female principles in incarnation, interwoven, as in the Chinese yin and yang, and it shows them holding hands. The active male principle operates through the solid earth, while the passive female principle operates through the fluid consciousness of water. They hold hands to indicate that their activities are reciprocal. This is also a reference to Gemini, the sign which links Taurus of the earth and Cancer of the water. Gemini was also the sign referred by the Greeks and Romans to Apollo and to the sun. The relationship of the sun to the zodiac is of some importance, as is indicated by the 12 rays in both the Golden Dawn and Crowley cards. Waite only put 22, but those represent the 22 paths on the tree. And of course, the Marseille is older, so it only had 16. It hasn't evolved into the system yet. But the zodiac relates to Chokmah, from which the energies of this path ultimately derive. The zodiac relates to where on the tree of life? The stars, the highest stage of the mysteries. But it also relates to Chokmah, which is up there where the highest stage of the mysteries. That's where the zodiac resides on the tree of life, right there. Okay? Now, the energy of this, that's where the energies of everything ultimately derive. The patterns of this energy are moreover shown by the salient and wavy rays, the alternating male and female currents on the waving and, the salient and waving rays of the sun as it comes out. The 7 falling yods and the Robert Wang card on both sides, male and female, Chokmah, again being the ultimate source of the yod, refer to the energies of the planets under the solar rulership descending into matter. Crowley's card, which relates to judgment, and it is a little different, but it relates to judgment, which we've already talked about, which was called the Aeon. It shows Heru-Ha, the Lord of Light, in the judgment card, who is the ruler of the new Aeon to come to the next stage of human development. Appreciating this emphasis, it is curiously amusing to realize that Aleister Crowley has based the card on his own family crest, the sun, charged with a rose on a Montvert. According to his explanation, the rose surrounded by the signs of the zodiac shows the development of the solar influence. The green mound of earth beneath the rose sun means fertility and is so shaped as to suggest aspiration towards the higher. As in other versions, there is a walled enclosure. But here, the children are outside of the wall, meaning that humanity is no longer bound by the prejudices, I couldn't say that word, of the people that date morally back to 25,000 BC. Most interesting, perhaps, is Crowley's point that the cross from the formula of the rose cross will expand into the sun and the 12 rays. It will no longer be limited by the 4 arms of the cross, but will radiate outward freely. One especially significant idea connected with this path of Raish and the sun is, as the Golden Dawn ritual of the 29th path states, that the sun embraces the whole of creation in its rays. This idea is conveyed in a variety of ways, such as by the 4 sunflowers and 22 rays in Arthur Edward Waite's card. So if you go back to Waite's card, you can see the 4 flowers that represent the 4 worlds here, Yod He Vav He. And then there's 22 rays of the sun that represent the 22 paths on the tree. Kind of cool, I think. And if you zoom in above the little head of the child there's 6 little flowers on their head. The number 6 represents Tifereth, Tifereth being the sun or the Christ energy, riding the horse of Apollo. Pretty cool. Now, Waite's card, meaning the 4 worlds and the 22 paths. The Golden Dawn card shows 10 flowers to represent the totality of the tree of life. Okay. Wang's card. See the flowers? There's 10 flowers here, representing the 10 Sephirah, corresponding to the tree of life. Not quite what you get when you get a lot of tarot videos on YouTube, but now you know the deeper meanings of the card, right? Let's see. Where are we at here? Okay. There we are. I lost my spot. So, in Crowley's card has been noted attempts to show the expansion of the rose and cross in relationship to the central sun of manifestation. Yeah, I mean, I like Crowley's. I always like the artwork of Crowley's cards because I can really like feel the energy when I see the cards, you know. And he doesn't hide a lot of stuff. I mean, here he's got the sun, the rays, the rose, even the 12 signs of the zodiac, not hidden at all. The artwork is around each of the rays that are coming from the sun. The male and the female, the masculine and feminine, the light and the warmth of the sun. But they're outside of that wall that usually you see the children inside the wall in other cards. I like how Crowley doesn't really, not really, hides things. He doesn't hide things in his cards, right? So it's, of course, it is necessary once more to observe the distinction between the 2 sides of the abyss. Creation and light mean all of the microprosopos, to which Tifereth is central. Potential yet darkness refers to the macro prosopos, i.e. the supernal triangle. All of this stuff is implied in the card. So what is the macro prosopos, the darkness? Well, let me use, should I use the circle? Yeah, I'll just use the circle. So up here is the first supernal triangle. That is the macro prosopos, the source of creation. The first planetary energy that starts creation is what? Bina, or Saturn. Okay? The microprosopos is represented by the rest, by the rest of these 7 spheres: Doth, Chesed, Geborah, Tifereth, Netzach, Hod, and Yesod. Saturn here is actually represented by Daath, coming from the energy above the macroprosopos. And then you'll have Jupiter, Mars, the Sun, which is in the middle of all this, right? Venus, Mercury, and the Moon, the 7 traditional planets. You'll see this stuff if you read the Golden Dawn books too. So, in that statement, what he just said, I hope that makes a little bit more sense. That, of course, it is necessary once more to observe the distinction between the 2 sides of the abyss. Creation and light means all of the microprosopos, all of those that, the 7 planets or the 6 planets around the sun, the 7th sun, to which Tifereth is central. Potential yet darkness refers to the macroprosopos, the supernal triangle at the top of the tree. So that's all of Wang teachings. There's more to, you can dig into this even more. That's all of Robert Wang's teachings about the sun card and what it actually represents. So the question is, how many people know this about the sun card, and that it, number one, that it actually corresponds to this path of initiation and manifestation here? Not a lot of people, but I'm sure they've read about it, but it just seems so complicated when they try to explain it or get into it. But that's what it actually represents. So let's, before we close this down, I always like to see what Lon Malu Duquette says about Crowley's card. So we're going to pull up Crowley's card here. It's because it's so profound. Now this is great, actually. A 229 in Crowley's deck. The Sun. The Lord of the Fire of the World, the planetary trumps of the sun, the original design, a sun below is a wall, in front of which in a fairy ring two children wantonly and shamelessly embracing. The Hebrew letter is Resh, which means head. The tree of life path is number 30, joining Hod, the sphere of splendor, to 9 of Yesod, the foundation. The colors are orange, gold, yellow, rich amber, and amber rayed red. Remember the colored worlds? There are the colors right there. Yay. All right. Every man and every woman is a star. And here's a quote, a poetic quote. Give forth the light to all without doubt. The clouds and shadows are no matter for thee. Make speech and silence, energy and stillness, twin forms of thy play. Very, very cool. In fortune-telling traditions, the sun is often interpreted as the card representing the person or the querent, or the face of the querent shows to the world. This indicates to me that deep down inside, all of us are inherently aware that we are ultimately solar beings. Crowley explains it like this. This is one of the simplest of the cards. It represents Heru-Ha, the Lord of the New Aeon, and his manifestation to the race of men as the sun, spiritual, moral, and physical. He is the Lord of light, life, liberty, and love. This Aeon has for its purpose the complete emancipation of the human race. That's a pretty cool statement by Crowley, and Lon Malu Duquette believes Crowley meant every word of it. Whenever he gets asked to explain the philosophy, or if you prefer the religion of Thelema, the first thing that Lon tells people is it's a modern form of sun worship. But then he's quick to add, but when I use the word sun, I also am referring to myself, the son of the sun god. Whether or not Crowley would have agreed with my gross generalization, he says, is debatable. Duquette believes, however, that it does describe in the most primitive terms the essence of Thelema. Love is the law, love under will. Now that human consciousness has been subtly mutated with the knowledge that the sun continually exists, what he's saying here is that in the beginning of time, we used to think that the sun it died at night, but now we know better, right? So we know that the sun continually exists, that it neither dies at night nor plunges towards extinction in the autumn. But we as a race are poised to identify our own consciousness with the same phenomenon. Just as sunlight is perpetual, consciousness is continuous. Death is an illusion every bit as much as night is an illusion. Immortality is simply consciousness of the continuity of existence. Heru-Ha is a unique name for the two opposite and equal forms of the Egyptian god Horus, Hor-Pakrat, which is the passive, innocent god of silence and infinite potential, often portrayed as a baby curled in the fetal position, pressing his thumb or forefinger to his lips. Ra-Hor-Khuit is the active, violent, hawk-headed avenger of the gods. Combined under the one name Heru-Ha, they are the divine expression of the passive and active dynamics of the element spirit. Freda Harris depicts the classic Egyptian images of both of these gods in the Aeon card, which we already talked about in a different video. So why should the sun, the ultimate symbol of unity and singularity in our solar system, be identified with this double nature? Well, from time immemorial, the doctrine of twin suns has bubbled secretly in the sanctuaries of the mysteries. Ancient traditions speak of a twin of Earth's sun about which it and our entire solar system rotate in a cyclic dance of hundreds of millions of years. Early Gnostic Christians dubbed Satan the twin of Christ, suggesting a great solar mystery hidden in the relationship. Well, in Isaiah, Lucifer is actually called what? Son of the morning, morning star. And in Revelations, the revelation, think about that word, John says that Jesus says, I am the bright and morning star. Whatever may have been the original circumstances and motives that created these ancient traditions, modern science affirms that the secret of the sun is indeed the perpetual struggle of two titanic forces, the active thermonuclear process that burns the sun's fuel and radiates light and energy outward into space, and the passive gravitational presence of the sun's own mass. The former keeps the sun from collapsing it upon itself, and the latter keeps the burning process perpetually contained and stable. Think about divine masculine and feminine, light and warmth. The twin babies in the Fool card, and the children, and the bride and groom in the Lovers card in this deck are earlier tarot incarnations of the two dancing children we find in the Sun card. According to Crowley, they represent the male and the female, eternally young, shameless, and innocent. They are dancing in the light, and yet they dwell upon the earth. They represent the next stage which is to be attained by mankind, and which complete freedom is alike the cause and the result of the new access of solar energy upon the earth. So now that we know a deeper meaning of the sun, I say this, let your light shine. Don't hide it under a bushel. Don't let the world allow you not to come into your true, authentic, individual nature. And that is the struggle of initiation. And it always will be. And the Sun card reminds us that energy is always there, and to not let it destroy us, but to come in contact with it and to let it guide us. And that's what the sun does. It is this Luke's energy that guides our life and light. And it gives back all of the experiences of this life into the source. And the source gives life and light to us so that we may have this life experience. So I hope that you understand a little bit more about the Sun card. I hope I haven't confused you or bored you. But thanks for watching until we get to the next path.